This semester, we're going to start off with an overview chapter. So chapter 1, A View of Life. In this chapter, or not in this chapter, but in all chapters with all of our lectures, I will put a list at the beginning that has our outline. This is going to cover all of the sections that we are going to go over in this class. So in this course, you should always start every chapter by looking at this outline. Even if you go ahead and start reading the textbook on your own or reading ahead, that's fine, but I strongly recommend that you look up this PowerPoint first, and that'll give you a heads up of which sections we're going to be covering. Especially later on in the semester, as we get further and further along, we won't be covering every single section, but this time we are going to cover each section. We're going to cover sections 1 through 4, the characteristics of life, evolution in the characteristics of life, the process of science, and then finally the challenges facing science. But we're going to start off by talking about the various characteristics of life. Biology as a whole is the scientific study of life, and there is a huge amount of diversity among living things. This is demonstrated in the figure that we have here. Over here on the far left, we have bacteria. Bacteria are ubiquitous, microscopic organisms that have relatively simple structures. Paramecium may look very simple. They may look very, very small. However, they are protists. They are also microscopic organisms, but they're much larger and much more complex than simple bacterium. And obviously, organisms are going to be diverse in a multitude of ways. But one of the things that we're going to look at, and we're going to focus on a little bit in this chapter, is how organisms differ, not only by their shape and structure, but on their ability to extract nutrients from their environment. So just for example, here we have a morel. A morel is a form of fungus. Funguses digest their food externally and then absorb those nutrients into the organism itself, into the body of the organisms. Plants, on the other hand, like this sunflower here, they're going to photosynthesize their food, usually by using energy from the sunlight. Here we go. I'm going to add myself a laser pointer real quick. So this sunflower here absorbs solar energy, turns it into chemical energy, stored chemical glucose energy, to then be used at a later time. Animals, on the other hand, like this octopus here, they have to ingest their food in order to extract nutrients from the environment. And that may seem very similar to funguses, but what happens with funguses is they secrete digestive juices and enzymes. They break down their food externally and then absorb it, whereas animals must put that food inside of their body. They have to ingest before they digest. They have to ingest, bring that food into their body before they can start to break it down into its base nutrients to obtain that energy from its environment. But despite this complexity and the diversity of life, there are a few characteristics that all living things share. So we're going to talk about those specific characteristics. Starting off, life is organized. All life is organized. And what we mean by this is that life can be categorized into levels of biological organization. They range from things super, super tiny like atoms all the way up to the ginormous biosphere, another term for Earth. The cell is going to be the basic unit of structure and function of all living things, because all living things are going to be either unicellular or multicellular organisms. Anything that is alive must at some point be a cell. So each level of organization is going to become increasingly more complex than the level preceding it. And as biological complexity increases, each level acquires new emergent properties. So that may seem like a lot, but we're going to break down all of these different levels as we go along. Starting off with the very first level, that's going to be the atomic level. So the atoms are going to be the most basic units of matter. And we're going to spend a lot of time in this in chapter 2. So I'm not going to dive in deep into atoms, but all living things are made up of matter, and all matter is made up of atoms. Those various atoms come together to form molecules. For example, a molecule of water is symbolized as, does anybody know what the molecular symbol for water is? I'm just going to pause here so you can think about it, shout it out. I don't know, shout it out to your cat who's sitting there watching you watch these lecture videos, or whoever it is that's your study buddy. What is the molecular formula of water? Go. Very good. It's H2O. Pause here if you know what that H2O stands for. But it stands for H2. There are 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom, H2O. So if that was this molecule right here, you can kind of ignore this atom back here and that atom back here. And you can look at that big one. The big gray one could be oxygen with these 2 off to the side could be hydrogen. That would be a molecule of H2O. And we're going to spend a lot of time on molecular structure and formula in our next chapter, Basic Chemistry. But multiple atoms come together to form a molecule. Lots and lots of molecules have to come together to form cells. Cells are going to be the smallest, most basic unit of life. While made up of non-living molecules itself, so molecules are not alive, atoms are not alive, but when we have a whole bunch of molecules working together, we can form what is known as the cell. There are going to be a lot of different organisms that range from multicellular to single-cellular, but cells are going to be made up of non-living molecules. The cell itself is actually considered alive. Many single-celled organisms, such as bacteria or paramecium, can function and live on their own, while others are going to form colonies. And so they can display all these different levels of biological organization. The organisms that we are most familiar with are going to be multicellular organisms. And that's really where we're going to spend the bulk of this semester, is looking at multicellular organisms. What we have right here is going to be examples of 2 different types of cells. Over here we have what is known as an animal cell, and over here on the right is going to be a plant cell. And we're going to spend a lot of time looking at plant and animal cells. But the next level of organization up from a cell is going to be a tissue. A tissue is going to be a group of cells with a common structure and function. So they are going to be performing, a group of cells all performing the same type of function. So in multicellular organisms, similar cells will combine together to form that tissue. Like in the case over here, we have nervous tissue. We have a bunch of nervous cells that are going to be nervous tissue. Over here, we have a bunch of plant cells. This is what we're forming over here is what's known as meristematic tissue. This is going to be the tissue that's found in leaves that's primarily responsible for photosynthesis. The next level of complexity up from tissue is going to be the organ level. Now, the organ level is where we have multiple tissues working together to perform a common function or a common goal. But it's going to be several different types of tissues. So for example, over here we have a bunch of different nerve cells. A bunch of different nerve cells will form a tissue. Several different types of nervous tissue are going to form what is known as the brain. That's an organ found in the human body or in most animals. Over here, we have a leaf. A leaf is actually considered an organ. An organ, the leaf is made up of multiple different types of tissue. We've got cuticle tissue on the outside. We've got spongy layers on the inside. We've got that mesophyll tissue on the inside. We've got vascular tissue in here as well. All of those different tissues working together are going to form the organ structure known as the leaf. Moving on from there, the next level of organization is going to be the organ system. Now, we are familiar with organ systems when we talk about animal cells, specifically humans. We talk about the digestive system or the respiratory system or the skeletal system. In that case, we have multiple organs working together to perform a common function, like digestion is going to be the main goal of the digestive system. The nervous system, its primary goal is going to be sending and receiving signals throughout the body. In the case of a leaf, a branch would be considered an organ system. Its primary responsibility is going to be photosynthesis. So here we have a shoot system or a, sort of a branch system off of that tree. Then we step back further and we're going to see the organism as a whole. When we have multiple organ systems functioning together, we have what is known as a whole and complete organism. And this does seem like the place that we would stop normally, because we're looking at biological organization. We have gone from this tiny little atomic level all the way up to a complete and fully functioning organism. However, and as we're going to find much later on, towards the end of the semester, life doesn't stop there. Just because we have a whole and complete organism doesn't mean that we are done talking about the study of life. There's going to be a whole lot of interaction beyond just that organism. So from that organism level, we're actually going to move on and we're going to study several more levels to that biological organization. The levels between cell and organism define the organization of a single individual, but beyond that individual are the levels that pertain to the environment and the ecological role of the organism. So the next level is going to be our population level. Population is going to be the biological level of organization that pertains to all members of the same species in a particular area at a particular time. So for example, if we're looking at elephants, here we have an elephant, that's going to be our organism. The population level will be the population of elephants in that particular area at that time, or that herd of elephants in that particular area, or that grove of trees found in that particular area or region. Beyond that level is going to be the community level. Now, the community level looks pretty basic, but actually it's very complex. Community refers to the variety of populations and species within a given environment. So we're still looking at that same environment, but now the elephant and the trees are both going to belong to that community. So for example, in my house, there is me, and I make up the organism level. But I also have my husband. So between me and my husband, we make up the human population level in our house. However, within the community, we have the two of us, but we also have any mice that are found. Mice also form an important part of the community in our home. My house plants form an important part of the community. My grass outside, the tree in my yard, all of those different species are going to be part of the community in my area on my property. So the community is going to be all of the different populations of living organisms. The ecosystem seems similar to the community, but the ecosystem takes into account not just the living components, but also the non-living components as well. So if you look at the difference between these two photos, here in the community level, we have the elephants and the grass and the trees and the zebras. But at the ecosystem level, we also have the sky. And I know it's really small and hard to see, but we have things like the weather, climate. Those play a very important role in the ecosystem. The amount of sunshine plays a very important part of the ecosystem. Water, the availability of water and nutrients, the nutrients found in the soil, those are all part of the ecosystem. So the ecosystem is both the living and the non-living components of the environment. Up from that ecosystem, we have the biosphere. The biosphere is going to contain all the different ecosystems. Basically, it's anywhere on Earth where life is found is going to be part of the biosphere, which, as you're going to find out a little bit later on, is pretty much the whole stinking planet is part of the biosphere. There's living organisms on almost every single surface of this whole entire planet. So basically, the biosphere, the component of all the living organisms, is going to be the entire planet. So that is going to be our levels of biological organization. So that's our very first characteristic of life, and that is that life is organized. That's going to be it for this video because I'm trying to keep our videos nice and short to aid you with your studying and fast forwarding and rewinding and finding certain places. So I'm going to keep these videos nice and short. Our next video will go into the remaining characteristics of life.